does have an operating system, and it is that autonomic nervous system, right? The reason I like to say automatic is because all of its functions happen without you having to put any effort, any thought into it. So if you like hold out your finger in front of you for me real quick, just hold out your finger, and then I want you to look at your fingernail, and then look at the screen. And then look at your fingernail, and then look back at the screen. All right, so nothing to you, right? But in order for your eyes to accommodate to something that close and something that far, that took millions of signals from the brain to the cortex to the brainstem to all the muscles of the eyes, the muscles that constrict the eye, the muscles that move the eye. And guess what? You're able to do that because it's an automatic system. You didn't have to think about it. So all of the things that keep us alive are things that fall under the purview of this autonomic nervous system. Things like your heart rate, your digestion, your respiratory system. All of those centers are located in the brainstem, right? In the medulla oblongata. Where's my Adam Sandler fans? There's something wrong with your medulla oblongata, right? Sometimes there is something wrong with your medulla oblongata. But that's where this system lives, right? The rest of the brain does some really cool things. It's there for speech and being able to understand what you're hearing or writing, moving your body. But if those areas of the brain are damaged, you may lose a little bit of that function, but your expression of life isn't going to be significantly altered, and it's definitely not going to cease. But when we're talking about the brainstem, when we're talking about that medulla oblongata, when that gets damaged, it is almost always certain death or severe inability to function normally, right? You guys remember Christopher Reeves fell off a horse, landed on his head. He had what's called a Jefferson burst fracture. That's basically where that top bone breaks into 4 pieces. So that top bone sits right up there. We call it the Atlas. Where's my mythological people at, right? Atlas holding the world on his head. Well, that's what we call that top bone, the Atlas, for the same reason. So he fractured that Atlas. They were able to surgically put him back together like Humpty Dumpty. But there was a little sliver of bone, I mean the tiniest sliver of bone, a little splinter of that bone that got lodged in his brainstem, all right? And that little bit of pressure from that was enough that he couldn't breathe on his own, right? He had a respirator. He couldn't digest any food. Everything was fed through tubes. He couldn't control his own heart. He had a pacemaker. He didn't land on his chest, right? He landed on his neck. And that happened to him. And even with all the advances that we have in modern medicine, he still died because brainstem injuries are not good. Now, the other extreme of that, we have Dale Earnhardt, right? You guys remember him? Boom, crashed into a wall going more than 240 miles an hour, I think it was. So with him, when he hit that wall, that top bone just completely jumped over that second bone and severed the brainstem instantly. No bruising, no blood. It was just like someone turning off the lights. As a matter of fact, when they pulled him out of the car, everyone said he looked just peaceful, like he was just sleeping. Nothing looked like there was anything wrong with him, right? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about this autonomic nervous system and what it does and how stress affects it and how the way that it affects it can lead to chronic illness and disease. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the brainstem. And that's when we're seeing that pons, that midbrain, and the medulla. It's the master conductor of the brain, master conductor of the body. All right, so where does this system live? And what are its pieces? So this autonomic nervous system has 2 parts. It has the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic, right? Your sympathetic is fight or flight. You guys remember that from high school biology, fight or flight? The other one is called rest and digest, or the term I like for it, feed and breathe. That's what they taught us in school. Feed and breathe, parasympathetic, fight or flight, sympathetic. I'm not going to read all of this stuff to you, but I do want you to know that the limbic system and the hypothalamus are part of that as well. The hypothalamus is responsible for a lot of things, especially when it comes to do with production and secretion of hormones, right? And then also sleep cycles. So we're gonna go into this a little bit more. Oh, here's the other two parts that are really important. The brainstem, which we already talked about, and the spinal cord. So when you're looking at the spinal cord is really just an extension of the brain. It's one continuous organ. I'm not sure why we split it like that, but the cord and the brainstem are one continuous organ, right? And they are, if the brain is the master conductor, then the spinal cord is the highway of how these messages get to and from the body. All right, so here we're going to talk a little bit about what the parasympathetic and the sympathetic does. So the parasympathetic constricts your pupils, right? So we were doing that when we were looking back and forth. It increases saliva production, which is how it helps aid in digestion, right? It also is going to decrease your heart rate, right? So if you have high blood pressure, you want the parasympathetic part of the nervous system to be running the show. You don't want to be sympathetic dominant. It also constricts your bronchi, parasympathetic, decreases blood flow to skeletal muscles, and increases digestion. It also increases the organs of detoxing your body. So that is why it is called feed and breathe. It also activates the cells and the organs of your body that are responsible for actual healing. So if you are a person that is stuck in sympathetic mode, it doesn't matter if you're eating the best food or think you're getting the best sleep, your body is not going to heal. It's not going to heal at its capacity that it should be able to. All right? And it also helps control the bladder, the parasympathetic. Now on the opposite side here, we have that sympathetic, and that does pretty much the opposite. It dilates pupils, right? We call it fight or flight. Why? If you run into a scary situation, those pupils get big to help you see more color and be able to appraise your surroundings and find a way out, right? So that's why that happens. The other thing that you'll have is you'll have decreased saliva production. You ever get that dry mouth feeling? You know, sometimes when people have to public speak, they get so nervous, their mouth gets so dry, and then they get that water, and they're like, you guys remember Marco Rubio? You guys remember that? Right? That's very sympathetic response at that time. It also is going to constrict blood vessels and increase blood pressure, right? Those are all things that you want to happen if you see a bear in the woods. It's also going to increase blood flow to the muscles, and it's going to stop. It is going to stop any and all digestion, because when you see a bear in the woods, digesting lunch is not as important as not becoming lunch, right? So your body knows this. The brainstem knows all this. Says, oh, there's trouble here. Let's turn off all the stuff that we don't need in this immediate moment. Let's turn off digestion. Let's turn off healing. Let's turn off detoxing. That's not important right now. Right now we need to survive, right? So the problem is that what happens when you just stay in sympathetic mode and there is no bear in the woods and you can't get your body to go back into parasympathetic? That's where the beginnings of chronic illness and disease, that's where the seed is planted, when a person becomes sympathetic dominant. All right, so we'll break down some very just easy ways to remember this. So we have those two, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, right? So when we're talking about the sympathetic, it is catabolic. The word catabolic is just a $50 word with a 5-cent meaning that means breaking down. So catabolic is breaking the body down. So when you're in sympathetic mode, it is actually breaking the body down. Anabolic is the complete opposite. That is building the body up. So when a person is in parasympathetic mode, they're building health. They're actually healing, regenerating, healing. For organs and glands, the ones that are activated, we're going to have the brain, muscle, the pancreas, the thyroid, and the adrenals. Those are all activated by sympathetic. When it comes to parasympathetic, it's going to be the liver, the kidneys, the pancreas, a different part of the pancreas, the stomach, the small intestine, and the colon. So this is how it aids in digestion, because it actually it signals those organs to turn on. Now pay attention to this. We're talking about hormones that increase when a person is in sympathetic dominance. Do any of those, besides thyroid, do any of those sound like you want them to be raised in your body? Right? Insulin, high cortisol. How many know cortisol is one of these stress hormones? Right? Yeah. So when a person is sympathetic dominant, it doesn't matter if they're eating the best food, if they're going to the gym and they're doing 1,000 crunches, that little belly pooch down here, that is, if cortisol could live somewhere, that's where it would live. Just move in right there, blow up its air mattress and just hang out there. It's almost impossible to get rid of that lower belly fat when there's too much cortisol in the system. And it doesn't matter that you're exercising or that you're eating right. It's not going to affect that lower part of the stomach. But the parasympathetic turns on the parathyroid, increases bowel motility and production, and also all your digestive enzymes. Now here's the other one. When we go down here and we see how it raises blood pressure and raises blood sugar, it's easy to see. If it raises insulin, right, it's going to create sugar problems for a person. And then parasympathetic activates digestion, elimination, and the immune system. All right, so now I'm going to talk about something that may seem very woo-ish, but it's actually rooted in science. Right? How many people have been told you have to write down goals? You have to write down your goals. When you write down your goals, like, they're more likely to come true. Okay, that sounds really nice. But there's actually a biological basis for that. So we're talking about this part of the brainstem called the locus coeruleus. So the locus coeruleus, what it does, it's one of the most primitive parts of the brain. And it is a task-achieving organ of the brain. So the locus coeruleus, its sole purpose is completing tasks. But it has to know what those tasks are. It's like, did you guys ever play that, I'm going to date myself here. Anyone ever played that punch buggy game? Right? Where if you see a Volkswagen, you punch someone. Right. Before you play the game, you probably didn't notice any Volkswagen bugs on the road. As soon as you put that in your brain, they're everywhere. They're everywhere, right? Same thing happens when you buy a new car. You're like, I'm going to buy this car. I love this car. I haven't seen many of these on the road. As soon as you buy that car, you get on the road, you see all of them. They were there before. They were there before. They didn't just appear. They were there before. But you put it in your mind's purview, and the locus coeruleus says, what is this that we're trying to do? This is the most mammalian, reptilian part of our brain because we need to find food. So when we're hunting, right, this is the part of the brain that's activated, the locus coeruleus. The locus coeruleus is constantly trying to give you what you tell it you want. Whether you write it out or speak it out, it actually neurologically hardwires that part of the brain to seek this out. And then, so it makes more sense when people say if you write stuff down, you're more likely to have that opportunity. It's just, you're just making your brain, you're making the locus coeruleus aware that you're looking for this. Okay? So, in essence, what the locus coeruleus does is it is constantly getting information from your external environment and making your body make the appropriate adaptations to survive in that environment. That's what the locus coeruleus does. That's an easy way to remember what it does is it's constantly trying to allow you to survive by appraising your external environment. And some of the things that it's involved in is arousal, your sleep-wake cycle. So being able to be aroused in your sleep-wake cycle, that's the locus coeruleus, right? It also plays an important role in behavioral flexibility. So what does that mean? Behavioral flexibility is, you ever see that one person who, they get out of their car at the gas station, they're trying to get gas, and then they realize they didn't open the thing, and just that, they lose it. They rip the thing out of the gas thing, and they get in their car, they drive away, they don't even close. That person has very little behavioral flexibility. There's something wrong with their medulla oblongata, right? So it also is going to create behavioral inhibition in stressful situations. So it's a very important part of the brain, especially for survival. It also helps control cognitive control, emotions, and here's a new word, neuroplasticity. Again, another very expensive word that just means the ability for the brain to be able to grow something new, to change, right? And then also is very important for posture and balance. Why? Because it's constantly getting information from your surroundings to tell your brain, to tell your body where it is in time and space, right? So now we'll talk about another guy. See how these guys are all right there in the brainstem, that little red area? This is something that's called the nucleus tractus solitarius. You don't need to remember that. There's not going to be a quiz.
A dinosaur?
It sounds like a dinosaur, and it's probably as old as one. But what it does is it does something very similar to the locus coeruleus, except that it's not monitoring your external environment, it's monitoring your internal environment. So when you put food in your body, water, drinks, chemicals, things that you're breathing in, all of that information is being gathered by this NTS, the nucleus tractus solitarius, and the vagus nerve. How many people have heard of the vagus nerve? The big wanderer, because it has connections to almost all of your major vital organs. It also has a nucleus that meets up with this nucleus tractus solitarius. So, what does that mean? It means that we have, in that part of the brainstem, we have something that's constantly monitoring our external environment to make sure that we can survive. And then we also have something at the same time monitoring what's going on the inside to be able to adapt to that internal environment for your best expression of life, right? So you have taste from the facial nerve, sensory from the ear, from the middle ear. This can wreak havoc with people that have balance issues, dizziness, vertigo, right? And then we're also going to have receptors in the carotid body. That's how it's measuring what's going on with your blood pressure. Here's something interesting. You ever notice like you're just sitting there and you're not exercising, you're just kind of watching TV, and then you go,
Yeah.
like, why does that happen? Yeah. I'll tell you exactly why that happens. Because there's a carotid body right at that subclavian artery right there, and it's connected to that NTS, and it says, blood pressure's getting too low, blood pressure's getting too low. You breathe, and that breathing gives us that little bump that we need. Right? It's amazing. It's amazing how this thing happens, and you don't have to think about it. Think of how little you would be able to do if you had to concentrate on just keeping your heart beating. Like, don't talk to me right now. I gotta keep my heart. That's just one thing. That's just one thing. Move on. And then the hypothalamus and the brainstem, the locus coeruleus, all of these things are working together. Yeah. Skip this one. All right, so why does this matter? Why is a chiropractor talking to you guys about this? Because you see that little red thing on the slide? That's the brainstem. That's the brainstem. And this thing that's crossing through it right there, that is that top bone in the neck called the atlas. It resides at the same level where the brain and the brainstem become the cord, and at that transition point is where that happens. All right? So now is when I get to do my is your head on straight dance, right? Because what happens is, remember we said that these two things are constantly getting information from your environment to tell you where you are, right? And remember that we said that the locus coeruleus is also concerned with posture and balance, right? So let's say that something happened, you had some fall, some blow to the head, some car accident, and now you have a head tilt. I'm going to exaggerate it just so you can see, but it doesn't have to be that exaggerated. But let's say that now your head is like this. Okay, if you tried to walk around like this, you wouldn't be able to. You would stumble as if you had too much wine, right? You would feel off. Why? Because remember we said that information from the middle ear, from the eyes, are constantly going to help with posture and balance. That's why we have that inner ear liquid. It helps with balance. So when this is going on, that doesn't work. In order for your body to know where it is in time and space, your brain has to get information, but that information is only useful if the eyes and the ears are balanced with your horizon. Right? So when this is going on, you can stand like this, but as soon as you try to walk, that's not going to work. Your body's going to compensate for that. So if the head is doing this, your body might take that shoulder and bring it down a little bit to get the head back over the middle. However, that creates a very big curve throughout the spine, puts too much pressure on that lower spine, on that opposite hip, and it'll cause that hip to raise up to try to get things as aligned as possible, right? So the head does this, the shoulder does this, the opposite hip does this, and then now you walk around like this for 5, 10, 15 years and you feel fine. But you're placing stress on joints that isn't right. You ever had a wheel on your car that wasn't in the best alignment possible? It just chews through tires. You can keep getting new tires if you want, or you can just get in alignment, and then you don't have to do that, right? So that's what happens there. And as soon as that happens, all the information from the locus coeruleus of that external environment is not going to be working the way that it should be. All right, so what are we looking at here? Now, this is an actual dissection. And the reason I'm showing you this is because there's something very interesting that happens at this part of the spine. So our brain and our spinal cord are wrapped in a couple of wrappings that are like saran wrap, right? And one of them is called the dura mater. That's Latin for tough mother. That's what it means. So this most outer wrapping of the brain and the spinal cord is called the tough mother, the dura mater. And at the top here, it actually attaches to the inside of those bones. So let's grab a pair and send those around.